all over his office. At that time, this valley was known for...
I'm sure everyone's familiar, but what current law is put in place first by a vote of the people in 2001. Initiative 747 limited annual property tax increases to 1%. So over 20 years it's been in place. In 2007, it was actually ruled unconstitutional by our state Supreme Court, but immediately the governor called in a special session, and on a bipartisan basis, the legislature and a Democratic governor put that 1% limit back in place. We've been working with that limit for a long time now. What the bill before us does is throws all that out the window. It replaces the 1% cap with no cap at all. It says it's only going to be bound by inflation and population growth. And practically what this means, if you take an average over the last 10 years, it's about 4.5% growth, but can be as high. A few years ago, you may recall, we had very high inflation. It could be as high as 10% in a single year. And while that might not sound like a lot, going from 1% to an average of 4.5%, the compounding nature of the property tax means 10 years from now, it's about $16 billion in additional property tax across our state. Drill down to individual level, if you take a conservative estimate done in the fiscal note, it ends up being about $1,000 per person for an average home. A more realistic, based on what we think will really happen, it's probably closer to double that. Imagine that, an additional $2,000 per person to either live in your home, or if you rent, because let's be clear about this, it also very much affects renters, because housing providers have to pass their costs through to renters, or they can't survive. So whether you're a homeowner or a renter, imagine how you're going to handle an additional $2,000 a year. That's what the bill before us proposes, and I want to be clear about who this affects. Every homeowner, every renter in our state, which pretty much everyone in our state, and disproportionately affects those who are at the lower end of the income scale. We have a lot of talk around here about fixing our tax system, about the regressive nature of our tax system here in Washington, and yet the Democratic majority, as part of their enormous tax package, are proposing an enormous property tax increase, a very regressive tax. By the very study that they refer to all the time, the ITEP says the property tax is regressive. So I'm not making that up. That's just what their study says, and yet they're proposing it. So we have a bunch of folks here to talk about this proposal. We're going to start off with a few members of our caucus to talk about specifics and how it would affect different parts of the budget and different parts of the population. And then we're blessed to have a bunch of citizens from around the state join us and share how this would affect them personally. So again, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for helping us spread the word about this very regressive property tax across the state of Washington. I will turn this over to State Senator Keith Gaynor.
Good morning. I am State Senator Keith Gaynor, representing the 12th District, but for this session I've been serving as the ranking member on housing. So I just want to touch just a little bit on how housing and home ownership would be impacted by these proposed taxes. Home ownership is a goal for all of us. I mean, I think that's what we aspire to, because that's the one wealth builder that you can have. And what happens with these proposed taxes, it will drive up the cost of home ownership. These taxes are, when you're going to get your financing to buy a home, that will have to be factored in. So that means you're going to be buying less of a home. That means that the buyer's market will be shrinking for those who actually have homes for sale. So it will impact home sale prices and the ability for people to actually get in a home. Taxes, the way they're being proposed here, are a variable that you cannot really control. So if you're getting your financing, you're locking in your mortgage, you know what your payments are going to be. But this bill, if it's enacted, will make it really more and more difficult for people to actually stay in their homes. What we're hearing right now from people, particularly senior citizens, are saying, well, I've lived in my home pretty much my whole life, and I can't afford to stay here. And yet we're talking about making it even more difficult for them to financially stay within their home. So I think that we recognize that taxes are a price that we all pay for government services. And unfortunately, in this particular case, we're not getting any services that are going to actually benefit that home homeowner because it is just a tax on that property without any increased benefits. But what it also does is it creates an unstable market for the home builders. So if anyone is wanting to build a home, even if you have, I don't know how many actual spec homes we see anymore, because that used to be something that builders would do because there was a market for buyers. But when you make it more and more difficult for people to get into their home, it makes it less likely that people actually will be building. So I think this is one of those things that, typically if you have a tax, you can maybe modify your behavior and minimize that tax on your budget. But with a property tax, there is no modifying that. You are in your home, you hope to stay there, but we will be making it much more difficult for people to do that. So I'm hopeful that we can resist going that route, because we have proposed keeping government the size that it is without increased taxes because of the increased revenues that we've seen. But it is an uphill battle for us to convey that message, and that's why I'm thankful people are here today to share their story. So I'll turn it over to Senator Chris Gilbert.
All right, well, good morning. I am Chris Gildon, your senator for the 25th Legislative District, and I am the budget lead for Senate Republicans this year. The people of Washington put the 1% property tax increase into law years ago for the very purpose to curb the never-ending desire and appetite for new and increasing taxes by people in Olympia. Now, Democrats want to take that away. The majority talks a lot of times about making the wealthy pay. It seems to be a sort of a mantra of theirs. But then whenever they propose taxes just like this that are going to affect working class people, middle class people, people who are just trying to get by, I can't reconcile the words and the actions. If this particular policy had been in place over the last decade, it would result in the average home costing about $2,000 more in taxes this year than they currently cost. It's a lot of money. And the truth about it is, state government does not need any additional taxes this year. We have proven that with our state Washington budget, where we balance the budget, we fully fund the needs and priorities of our state, and we do so without raising even a single penny of additional taxes. It can be done. And I think the Democrats in Olympia need to take that as a lesson and go back, relook their priorities, because they cannot say that they support affordability in our state if they also support regressive taxes that decrease affordability for people all across our state. You cannot support both. So from here on, if they pass this tax, it will be my job and it will be your job to call every one of them out anytime that they say that they support affordability, because you cannot support a property tax increase and support affordability. Thanks. I'll be followed by Senator Nikki Torres.
The smaller one? No, either one. Okay. That was for my height, but thank you. Well, good morning. Nikki Torres, State Senator for the floating 15th District. And as you've been hearing, the same messages here is that, people are saying loud and clear that we don't want an increase or a removal of the 1% cap on our property taxes. Unchecked property taxes will harm both homeowners and renters. Rising property taxes will force homeowners out of their homes and drive up rents, creating a financial burden for everyone. The uncapped property taxes worsen, not fix, a regressive tax system. This approach hits low and middle income families the hardest, deepening inequality and putting vulnerable communities at even greater risk. Property tax increases will price out minority communities from home ownership. The rising taxes will make it even harder for minority families to achieve the dream of owning a home, worsening the racial wealth gap. My parents came here to the U.S. and they came for the American dream. They purchased their first home, and then after that, they started renting it. But pretty soon they decided, I got to let that go. But they had already purchased another home, so it was great. And we want others to have that same opportunity. So this is not the way to do it. This is very regressive. Again, it's going to hurt homeowners. It's going to price them out. It's also going to hurt first-time home buyers. They're not going to be able to purchase their first home and have that American dream, as many others have. And as you see a stack before you right there, 43,000 people signed in con. It's actually 43,680 signed in con against this proposal. So next, I will call up Marie Goff again.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Marie Gofigan. I work and reside in Mason County and have 2 children who graduated from Shelton High School. Some time ago, I needed to move in to care for both my parents. My father passed away early, and I moved in, after I moved in, leaving me to care for my mother, who unexpectedly passed away in August 3 years ago, leaving the house and back taxes to me. Over the last 3.5 years, I have struggled to make my property tax payments because of the increased value in my home and the subsequent taxes associated with the value increase. During my time in caring for my mother, I found myself continually behind, and finally, after 3 years of hard work, dipping into my retirement and selling my mother's jewelry, excuse me, I was finally able to get caught up. However, now I need to make the property taxes again due this month. Now, Senate Bill 5798 is being presented and will again put me and others like me on the brink of losing our houses. In my eyes, this bill is the difference of being able to own a home, afford to pay taxes, and contribute to society, or becoming a user of state resources when I can no longer have a home. One of my children lives with me because housing is so unaffordable. Utilities, gas, and groceries are beyond expensive. This bill to increase property taxes goes completely against the idea of housing affordability, and I ask with everything I have for this legislature to not pass it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Hi, well, we're Bill and Alice Wells. We're from Mason County, 35th Legislative District, and we're here basically to speak against the rise in property taxes. We've had rentals for over 20 years. We're small landlords. We have probably close to 30 rentals, but we rent to a lot of low-income people, a lot of people who are on Social Security, a lot of people who have just minimum wage jobs. Some people are on public assistance of one form or another. So, a lot of times we try to absorb the costs of different things that rise, electricity rates, garbage rates, taxes, because we try to keep the people in the places that we've rented to them. And we've done that a number of times where we just try to, basically not raise the rent. But if this goes the way they're talking about, there's going to be a lot of people on the street. We're just not going to be able to absorb anymore. There's just no more room, for anything that substantially is going to raise it. Dealing with the people that we deal with, we're in the low-income market. So there just isn't any way it's going to work.
No, Washington State does have a homeless problem, and we are hands-on helping to solve that problem in Mason County. So, like Bill said, the percentage of our tenants are low income. They get their money from the homeless shelter or from community action or from their Social Security. That's the majority of our tenants.
Some have jobs, but
yeah,
it's
a few have
low-income jobs.
Yes,
Yeah.
all of them are low-income people that if they didn't have the rentals, they would be on the street or struggling or couch surfing. Yeah. And we get calls every week from people who are looking desperate for a place to live. And we manage 24 rentals, and we own 17 properties, and they're used for rentals for these people. And we can't raise the rent on them. And there's nobody, I don't believe anybody who has lower rentals than we do.
Lower priced.
The price on the rents, what they pay, than we do. And we see it as a ministry, and it does help our income, but it can wipe us out if this tax goes up.
Yeah, we just can't absorb anymore. And we'll keep it brief. That's
Okay.
what we had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
everyone. My name is Dakota Manley. I live, here in Olympia in Thurston County, but I want to speak on my experience seeing my rent increase back when I was at Central Washington University in Ellensburg. There I lived off campus with a roommate, and one day we got a letter on our door saying that, our rent was going to be increased. And it went up by $200, which, may not seem like a lot, but to a college student who's living off campus and trying to make ends meet, it was a lot. And I figured it was just going to get worse, and so I moved here to try and find a higher paying job. And next thing I know, as I'm talking with my father, and he rents too, just a few weeks ago, he tells me that his rent went up. And he got that exact same letter, that they were increasing the increasing the rent because of the property taxes, and it went up by $100. And all I can see in the future is with these taxes, it's just going to increase even more. And I urge this legislature to stop and not pass this property tax, because it's going to hurt renters. It's clear. And I'm going to keep it brief, but thank you for your time.
Good morning. My name is Anthony Mixer, and I represent a bunch of young people across the state of Washington who have a collective agreement that increasing property taxes is going to hurt them the most. Young homeowners, for those who actually want to buy a home, they can't even afford it now. The taxes are just way too high, and with this, it's going to be astronomically unbearable to even try to buy a home. The majority here in the legislature, they like to talk about affordable housing, but this tax policy is the completely opposite direction of going towards an affordable housing situation. There's not enough units here in this state. Permitting is hard, bunch of regulations. And Governor Ferguson mentioned in his inaugural address that Washington faces an affordability crisis. We agree with that. The cost of groceries and basic needs is just through the roof. And, with a tax policy like this, people can't make it. I hear a lot about of a regressive tax code we have here in the state, and some of us agree that we could have our tax situation be better. But this bill, 5798, it is a regressive tax that places burdens on seniors with fixed incomes and those who want to be able to afford a home, young people like myself, and even young homeowners right now. And, the public has weighed in on these bills, and the majority does need to listen to them. I'll mention a couple bills in the House. House Bill 1334. This was the basically the Senate version of 5770 from the previous 2 years. 12,124 signed in opposition to that bill, and that was heard back in February, if I remember correctly. And then just recently, they introduced House Bill 2049, basically same thing, 1% to 3% cap raise. 16,129 signed in opposition to that bill. But for this particular bill, 5798, and you see the stack right there in front of you, 43,680 signed in opposition to that. That is a record-breaking number of sign-ins on any bill in the history of the state of Washington. The second most sign-ons was actually for the, if I remember correctly, road usage charge that they were looking at in the House. I think that was about close to 20,000 people signed in on that one. People do not need tax increases placed on them right now. In fact, if I remember right, I think there was a King 5 or Como poll that was done showing that people, they actually want the government to start making cuts and not increasing taxes. Simultaneously, this legislature is also looking at capping rents. That is not going to help the situation at all. The landlords, if they cannot break even with, having to cap and then property taxes continue to go up, they're going to have to do away with the unit. I've already talked to multiple people who do rent units. They say they're just going to sell them off and not even have a rental market. There's one thing I'll say is that, housing supply is rent control. when more is built, rents fall. So I'll end this by saying that personally for me, I've wanted to look at buying a home for the past 2 years or so. If this were to pass, I don't think I'm going to be buying a home in this state. I'm probably going to move out. That is what's going to happen under this policy. People do not want to live here if their property taxes are just going to diminish the wages that they make. So anyway, thanks for hearing me out. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Sue Wise. I've been a local realtor here for over 25 years, and I agree with most of what has been said already. But I do want to bring up some examples. And one is that there's a lot of people that have been scrambling to try to buy a house. Some of them have been able to do that over the last couple years, although pricing of houses has gotten higher and higher. And now that they've gotten into a house, there's a question as whether they're going to be able to keep their house if the taxes are raised. In addition, there's people that are saving now, and that goal just keeps getting further and further away as prices keep going up. The mortgage rates are higher. The interest rates have not come down as much as we anticipated. The insurance rates are astronomical, and just property taxes on top of this will kill the housing industry. And in my opinion, and in my experience, I have a lot of clients that will be very disappointed throughout the state if this should go through. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Gina Carlson, and I own Dunamis Interiors and Design Build. I am a mother, I am a homeowner, I own rental properties, and I also sit on the board for the Olympia Master Builders, and our primary mission is affordable housing. This bill should be a concern to everybody. It's a nonpartisan disaster. I want my children to have a home someday. I couldn't even provide that at cost at today's rate of the rising cost of homes. You put a bill in place like this, and we have no idea what the implications of that could be, other than people being driven out of their homes, driven out of the state, and driven out of economy that we have a chance to save. And I'm so grateful for our representatives here that are a voice for us. A bill that won't give the voters a voice is undemocratic, and it just destroys the American dream. I have had to work harder and smarter with my business in order to afford my home. My property taxes and insurance costs, my escrow account has quadrupled in the course of the time that I've owned a home. And now this. I find it incomprehensible that something like this could even be brought to the table when there are ways of managing this budget that our true representatives would testify. So I'm here to support the American dream. I'm here to support affordable housing and the future of our state. And thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak. And thank you to all of you.
Hello, my name is James Fisher. I've been a real estate broker in North Tacoma for roughly about 10 years now. I and many of my colleagues feel worried that the proposed property tax increase is not only going to affect our clients, our neighbors, and our community, one, by making housing more expensive, but the potential property tax increase is theoretically unlimited and unknowable. That is frightening to a lot of people. One of my clients is a 67-year-old retiree. She lives on a fixed income, and we were chatting the other day, and we were having a discussion about the proposed property tax increase. And she mentioned to me that if this did go through, that she might potentially consider selling her home. And she would think about moving in with her adult children or potentially renting. That puts her in a hard place because when you go from homeownership for decades to renting, there are costs associated with that typically only go up. It's not only the proposed property tax increase. The other factor she has on a fixed income is just the higher cost of living in general in the state. And when I think about her in that conversation, I know that it's not only her. She's not the only one dealing with these types of situations. This affects people that already own a home as well. The increased tax burden, like you've heard, is going to place potential future homeowners at a disadvantage. For anybody thinking about buying a home who doesn't currently own a home, factor this in, and it does erode the amount of affordability that you can obtain when you're buying a home, right? As real estate brokers, we do see the direct impacts that this has on our clients, what the lack of affordable housing essentially does to a community, and it's widely accepted that homeownership is a cornerstone of wealth building as well as community investment. So increasing the cost of housing where we're in a state with an extremely limited supply and a higher median price than most of the U.S., it really doesn't make any sense. So thank you for your time today.
All right, well, thank you. I want to start by thanking everyone that took the time to show up and had the courage to speak up to fight back against this outrageous property tax. One more last round of applause for everybody who came. We're going to keep pushing back. This is the wrong answer for Washington. It's the wrong answer for homeowners. It's the wrong answer for renters. And we think that if the people of the state of Washington speak up, talk to their legislators, that this will ultimately, that the will of the people will prevail. But I want to take a few minutes to see if there are any questions from media.
What is the likelihood of stopping this?
Nice question, Carla. I think it's entirely possible. Look, we've been through, this is the third year we fought this, right? And in each year, including this year, and you see the stack of folks who signed in against it, each year the people of the state of Washington have spoken up across the state in Republican and Democratic districts and said, no, this is wrong. So I think that if we do our job, which is to get the word out and let people know what's in front of the legislature, they will speak up and we have a good chance of stopping it. But it's going to take work on all of our part to make that happen.
I wanted to ask, there were some numbers that you said just like average cost would go up. How did you calculate that?
So some of them, they're derived from the average, you just use the formula, Bill, the average inflation over the last 10 years and the average population growth over the last 10 years. And we can share the numbers with you separately if you like. Some of it's actually some of the numbers used are actually in the fiscal note.
Any update on budget negotiations? Are you guys still kind of locked out of what's happening?
Well, you may recall we had a significant discussion on the floor of the Senate last week where we argued against going into conference because, as anyone familiar with the process and what conference means, for those of you who don't know, it just means that we designate three people, two from the majority and one from the minority in each chamber to go in and negotiate a budget. But what really happens in practice is the two Democrats from the majority in the Senate and the two Democrats from the majority in the House, they go and negotiate the budget, and nobody hears about it for a couple weeks till it comes out. They claimed that no, this would be very transparent. Well, I can tell you we're on, I think, day 7 of transparency, and I don't think a single one of us has heard a word about where the budget negotiations are. There's a better way to do this. We've seen a better way to do this, where you do it in the public, you exchange positions as big things are negotiated, and people have a chance to weigh in. And most importantly, another thing that's not commonly known, but it's an important part of the conference process, is when whatever they decide in private in that back room room comes to light, there's no opportunity for any legislator on either side of the aisle to offer an amendment. It's simply an up or down vote, and that's what they want. They want to go negotiate in secret, bring forth a budget that they like, that doesn't represent the will of the people across our great state, and vote on a yes or no and go home without any additional scrutiny.
Can I also ask, the limit that's been in place since like
2001.
Yeah, that hasn't changed, but we've heard from folks that their property tax, like their home bills have continued to increase. I guess the question in my mind is like, does this bring up a need to closer look at the home value assessment process as well? Or I guess how does that fit into the concerns around this?
Yeah, it's a good point. And property tax, when you really dig into it, is pretty complicated. It's driven, as you say, by assessed values. And I think that's a very fair point, that we should go back and look at assessed values. Fundamentally, though, those assessed values are driven by sales. And the challenge we have in our state, and it was mentioned by a couple of the earlier speakers, is we have a lack of supply. We've made it so expensive to build in our state. It's driven up the cost of housing. And therefore, when you have resale, the prices have been much higher. And this isn't just in the urban areas, it's in urban areas like where I represent. They've become very expensive, and that's what drives the assessed value. So, this whole thing is connected together. This bill that we're talking about today would make it worse by making the overall cost of housing, which is already outrageous in our state, even higher.
And I know you and Rep. Stokesbury have had some private conversations with the governor on some of these tax proposals. Are you willing to say where he comes down on the property tax proposal?
So I'm not going to go into the details of our discussions. I do appreciate that he has been willing to meet with us regularly. They've been cordial discussions. We have repeatedly brought up all the tax proposals in front of us, but very specifically the property tax proposal. He has, I think, listened earnestly. He has not committed himself any more in private than he has in public, where he has said he has been very specific on one of the taxes and concerned about all the taxes. And I like to think that he understands the regressive nature of the property tax and what it will do to people across our state, but he has not committed himself yet. I wish he would. All right. Yes, it looks like we might have a question from.
If more people were to lose their homes due to this policy and end up on the street, what kind of burden does that place on state services for the homeless? And is that something that this state can ultimately afford?
That's a very good point. I mean, it seems pretty clear. If folks can't afford to live in housing, if they can't either afford to own their home or rent their home, either because of the cost, we've seen in our state, we're one of the worst in the country in terms of homelessness. And we've been, frankly, in spite of spending billions of dollars, been unsuccessful in addressing that problem. I would suggest we need to go back to the root of the problem, part of the root of the problem, which is make housing affordable. And if you want to make housing affordable, you certainly don't increase property taxes. You can't make housing more affordable by making it more expensive. It's as simple as that. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your work to make sure the public across the state of Washington are informed about this bill and the potential challenges in front of them in terms of more property taxes. And I wish you a good day.